Hi everyone, my name is Abigail Leader. I'm the Director of Experiential Prevention Initiatives with the Office of the Dean of Students at the University of Oregon, and so excited to be here with you for Intertwined 2021, University of Oregon's 5th annual personal storytelling event. For the last 5 years, we've been bringing together students and faculty and staff from all over campus for a magical evening or two of personal storytelling where we get to share and listen and witness and learn from the stories of people within our community. This year, all of the stories have been formed around the theme chances. And I want to give a special thank you to Colin Vance, who is a brilliant and talented musician who has originally scored each of the stories that you're going to hear tonight. Again, thank you so much for being here.
Parents have always had these sayings that evolve over generations. Don't sit too close to the TV, you'll go blind. The internet is just a fad, don't get a job in that field. Don't eat black watermelon seeds, or a watermelon will grow in your stomach. Exaggerated rules that come from a good place, sure, but make very little sense, and as time is told, aren't usually followed to the letter. Acting counter to my parents' sayings at the time, I took a series of chances that put me where I am today. Chance number 1, the one where I trust strangers on the internet. To properly tell this story, I need to go all the way back to the before times, the long, long ago when we could congregate indoors, what feels like 1790, but is more accurately 2015. It's my freshman year of undergrad. I, a complete and unashamed nerd, am in my natural habitat, the local game store. The game of Dungeons & Dragons I had been a part of just ended, and one of the players introduces me to a Skype chat room for another game. It's rather exciting meeting all of these new people, but I was a bit concerned. Until then, nobody I had met online knew my real name. Since I had first started to use computers, my mom had, rather gratuitously if we're to be honest, warned me that if any of my personal information got out, people would find me. Some random person would figure out where I lived and steal me, my identity, my money. You get the picture. As exaggerated as it was, it made an impression. Because of that, I'd always gone by my screen name, totally unrelated to my real name. As the friendships built in this new chat room, that worry gave way to trust, and a few of these people soon came to know me by my real name. I began to worry anew that just by letting this personal information come out, I'd made a huge mistake. However, for one of these people, this trust became something a bit more intense. To make a long story short, hello, I'm gay. Hi gay, I'm dead. I didn't know this immediately, but I knew that if there was one singular universal truth, it was that guys were cute. I had no idea how to deal with this new information. A weird combination of worry, excitement, and confusion seemed to be my body's natural response. In realizing this universal truth, I had noticed that one of these people I'd met through the friend group was very cute. We began talking in private a bit more after admitting to each other that we'd formed a crush. Without going into detail, things escalated, and shortly after we just decided to become boyfriends. There was a weird combination of self-doubt, confidence, and yet again, worry. I had someone who loved me, but was I good enough for them? Especially since we'd never been together in person. We chatted on video before, but would we mesh physically? Especially since this was my first boyfriend, my first relationship even, and I had no idea how any of this dating stuff was supposed to work. I was petrified. Chance number 2, the one with Dallas-Fort Worth, or how I learned to stop worrying and love the layover. My new boyfriend and I planned to meet in person about 8 months after we became internet boyfriends, to use my mother's old parlance. We needed to find a time when both of us were free of school and work so that one of us could make a 2,700-mile plane trip across the country. Because being boyfriends with someone in my own state, let alone my own coast, would be too easy, right? After much back and forth, it was decided that I would be the first person to make the trip. Needless to say, my parents weren't happy, but they decided that since I was an adult, I could make my own mistakes. This was chance number 2. I was about to, by myself, cross the country by plane. I took a bus to a train station, train to the airport, and then after an hour layover in Dallas-Fort Worth, the next plane to my destination. I was incredibly nervous. I landed. The nerves intensified. I got in the car with the guy. The nerves intensified again. We stopped in a parking lot and got out of the car. Then, he hugged me. All of those pent-up nerves melted away, and I think I left them in the parking lot in Florida. I haven't really felt that nervous since. This was in the before times, so we went everywhere we could. Warm beaches, warm walks, warm everything. Really, I went in July. This was a mistake. At lunchtime, he and I took refuge in a restaurant after virtually swimming through a touristy area. Seriously, 98% humidity, 98 degrees. Help. We relaxed for a few minutes eating lunch at a pizza parlor when suddenly I felt the bottom of my stomach drop to the floor of the restaurant. We needed to meet his parents for dinner. Chance number 3, the one with the Godfather. That ice-cold worry worked its way up from my feet to the top of my skull, starting at my ankles. I had never met these people before in my life. As far as I knew, they had taught my boyfriend the same things that my parents had taught me. The dread reached my knees. My existence, from what I could tell, was basically that some internet stranger had flown across the country to be with their son. The dread reached my waist. We arrived at their house, walked in, and did introductions. The dread reached my chest. Things were going well until my boyfriend, in something I thought was a sneaky ploy to get his parents and I to bond, said he'd take a 15-minute nap, and then promptly passed out on the nearest horizontal surface for 2 hours straight. Curse his sudden, but in retrospect inevitable, betrayal. The dread reached my eyeballs. Just as I was about to try and sit with him for a while, staying in that wondrous feeling of safety his general vicinity provided, I heard the words that probably changed my life. "Hey Tristan, come over here and let's make ravioli." The dread hit the top of my head. I very desperately wanted to collapse, but the little bit of socially competent human in me grabbed my larynx and said, "Sure." We spent the next 2 hours working on some of the most tender, delicious ravioli I have ever had. I'm not really sure where all that dread went. I think it went into that ball of homemade pasta dough I needed as we talked and joked and discussed what I wanted to do while I was here. I was having an amazing time and genuinely starting to unwind and relax when his sister entered the house. Knock knock, who's there? It's Dread again. And a state prosecutor, Joy. Despite Dread knocking, it didn't stick around. His sister was a government attorney, and we almost immediately started talking about law schools. I felt good, relaxed, happy. 3,000 miles away from home, I felt like I was back in my parents' kitchen. My good mood helped the conversation move along, and when it came time to discuss what to do after college, I rode that good feeling further and decided to apply to law school. I honestly don't think that conversation would have happened, and I wouldn't be here talking to you about it without my recruitment into industrial-grade ravioli production. You might be waiting for a plot twist here. There isn't one. We're still together 5 years later. You might also be thinking, but what if? That's a great question. What if I listened to my parents? What if sitting too close to the TV blinded me? What if my boyfriend wasn't really my boyfriend, but was some random guy planning on kidnapping me and insert cliche bad thing here? If I'd listened to those what ifs, I wouldn't have gone. I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't really be the person I am today at all. Taking those chances made me feel a lot more comfortable taking risks, because as much as my brain tries to tell me that it'll all end badly, I now know that it's not guaranteed to end that way. I'm not going to go ziplining across an active volcano or swim unassisted across the Atlantic, but I think I could spend an 8th layover in Dallas-Fort Worth. The trip looks different for everyone. You don't need to travel 2,700 miles, but try and take the first step. You might just love where you end up.
On the drive to the airport, I could not stop crying. I had wanted to do this for a decade, but the reality of leaving my husband in Eugene, moving to Nicaragua for a year with essentially no plan, I was scared, I was thrilled, I was 100 different emotions. My husband and I hoped that we had built a foundation strong enough to withstand this, but we didn't know how the year would change me, change us. I found a host family to stay with, and they welcomed me, Though they were skeptical, they were used to hosting students for a couple weeks, and I couldn't quite explain what I was doing and wanted to stay for at least a couple months. That's a long time if a guest is making your life miserable. Thankfully, they took a chance on me, and we hit it off. The host family was like a soft pillow to cushion my fall. If I had to eat one meal for the rest of my life, it would be breakfast with Nietzsche, my host mom. Gallo pinto, crema, cuajada, fried sweet plantains, pancakes, delicious Nicaraguan coffee, accompanied with leisurely conversation. Never in a rush to clear the table. We enjoyed lingering, chatting for an hour after the last bites were consumed. I don't even remember what we talked about, but the feeling is clear as day. Warm and connected. And I played Tetris with my host nephew Brian and joined Lou, my host sister, to watch cheesy romantic comedies dubbed in Spanish. Not my favorite genre, but the Spanish practice was good, and it was nice just to be with someone as I coped with deeply missing my life partner of 10 years. They say home is where the heart is. Well, part of my home was missing. It was an emotional roller coaster. I remember a moment about 4 months in, alone in my room in the dark, Googling advice for homesickness. How do I cope with this? One piece of advice was keep finding new adventures. Well, I lucked out. I was able to join Lou and her friends in opening up a feminist cafe bar. For me, it was a fresh new adventure in the year, but for them, it was a dream project, and their futures were at stake. And allowing me in, a gringa they didn't really know, it was a risk. We worked a lot of 14-hour days together, and we stretched our skills in many ways. Cooking soup to taste like mom's, negotiating contracts, navigating neighbors who expressed displeasure by leaving their trash on our front porch, and Googling how to kill a scorpion. Eventually, I became part of their close-knit community. I don't think it could have gone this particular way had my husband been with me. I mean, we were a group of queer women operating completely in Spanish, carving out a space for ourselves in the nightlife. It was beautiful, and I had found my place in Nicaragua. Returning home was bittersweet, and the landing was a bit rough. I had grown used to Nicaraguan ways of being, and I felt off balance here. My husband made a simple direct request that I leave the door of the washer open so it would dry. It felt rude, harsh, even controlling. I confronted him, and thankfully he listened and then gently asked, "Could this be culture shock?" Yes, in fact, it could. With time, I settled back in, though I still miss Nicaragua. The risk of that year birthed so many new experiences and a love for my host family, my friends, and Nicaragua. A love deep enough that I am willing to grieve with them when they are in pain. And the last 3 years have been incredibly painful in Nicaragua. Our bar is long closed, and the country fell into a political and then economic crisis as the president turned dictator, targeting feminists and student activists. I watched the news knowing that loved ones could be in the crowd. Many fled the country out of economic desperation or fear for their lives. Still in exile today, my friends and 100,000 other people cannot return to their home. We've stayed in touch, and it has expanded my sense of the world, my sense of who my people are, realizing that my people are anyone I am willing to love. And my life is richer now, thanks to this journey. It was scary and hard and wild and wonderful. I'm proud of myself for taking the chance. And I did not do it alone. I am forever grateful for all those who took a chance on me.
The end of this month will mark roughly 2 decades since I first moved to the East Coast with my family. I got to know Washington, D.C. right as the nation went to war. The region battled a concerning surge of West Nile virus, and the district dealt with the confusion of a rogue sniper. The relative chaos of these years conditioned me to appreciate moments for reflection whenever I could find them. In particular, I think of one summer evening sitting out on our patio. My folks and I listening to a CD of Blue by Joni Mitchell, playing from the living room through a screen door, Mom plating her signature burgers, smoky sweet and enveloped in thick chunks of sharp cheddar while the meat rested. Dad, grinning widely, watching me duck a particularly large flying thing. You know what's coming this summer, right? My thoughts leapt to eager anticipation of the 6th installment of Harry Potter, as of then still unnamed. Go upstairs, he told me, now starting to laugh a bit. See if you can figure it out. I re-entered the now dark house, took the stairs up to the computer room, 2 steps at a time. I couldn't find much at first, so I decided to try local news, and lo, there it was. This summer, we'll see thousands of cicadas descend on DC. There would soon be zombie bugs the size of baby mice crawling out of the ground starting in roughly a week or so, depending on the weather. I was horrified. I sat in tepid disbelief, too small in my father's desk chair, musing over this imminent test of my sensibilities. Friends, it was everything the articles hyped and more. Every step we took outside for a month made a sickening crunch. Their air was continually a hum, and I've since learned that during mating season, these bugs can reach a sound level of 120 decibels. I remember school recesses overwhelmed by classmates running amok, attempting to catch the cicadas from out of the air, daring each other to eat them, while our school's associated priest tried to distract us into appeasement by participating in our kickball game. This past year, to put it lightly, hasn't been as diverting. In one way or another, we've all been stripped of our routines, our livelihoods, our friends and families, our core senses of stability. I've suffered from anxiety since I was about 10, but I tend to find things much more manageable with a little preparation, patience, and flexibility. I try to remember that it's all temporary, but whenever I feel like I especially can't handle something, I like to think back to a few summers ago when I was on a language study exchange in Qingdao, China, and I did not have the desired time to prepare for something that my mind felt overwhelmed by. On my 21st birthday, I ate a bowl of cicadas. If you recall, I am not the toughest when it comes to interacting with our insect neighbors. But on that day, my host family gifted me a bowl of roasted cicadas for breakfast, and I knew it was going to be a difficult first bite since I was less accustomed to insects through a culinary lens. Although, every time I'd cry out as a kid that I thought I'd swallowed a bug, my mom was always the first to simply smirk and quip, "Protein." I just realized that I had to consider that moment not as one of unpleasantness to be avoided, but as an experience to savor. As it turned out, the only truly difficult part about eating the cicadas was having to rectify my projections and having to do so quickly. What I had really been gifted was an opportunity to try thinking about things differently, a chance to develop resiliency. That brings us to this summer 2021. For those of us in the Mid-Atlantic region, our trials are not quite over. As of May 15th, we can expect the return of a familiar tune. The 17-year cicadas are due to reemerge as soon as the local ground temperature hits 64 degrees Fahrenheit. Rituals can remind us how far we've come between them. We've all had to do a lot of readjusting of our collective expectations lately. Personally, I have been trying to learn how to be more grateful, to appreciate the bizarre, the prodigious, the inelegant things that occasionally plague us. After the year we've had, I would gladly welcome the return of some minor inconveniences, like a delayed train, long wait for a table, or sold-out movie. Even something as simple as the return of a routine. This curious pattern of a cyclical cicada brood reemerging, as if nothing at all abnormal has occurred in their substantial absence, is magical to me. All cicadas can do is do what they've always done: emerge every 17 years at 64 degrees like clockwork. All we can do is decide that even this mundane wonder is something magnificent to behold.
August 8th, 2020, Facebook message. And hey, if you get super bored, you could always get tested for COVID and come visit Eugene. It's a Saturday at 9:55 p.m. and I am, let's call it, less than sober. I sent these words to a person that A, I dated when I was 17 years old, and surprise, surprise, it did not end great. B, I have not seen in the flesh since May of 2012. And C, I have spoken to every single day for the last 137 days. Oh, yeah, and it's the beginning of the 5th official month of the COVID-19 pandemic running absolutely rampant through the majority of the United States. Now, before you go thinking that this is a love story or something, I'm going to hit the pause button and tell you a couple of things about myself. Hi, my name is Emily. For those who know what this means, I'm basically your textbook Enneagram Type 2. For those who don't, my core motivation is to be loved by others, and the best way I know how to do that is by doing all of the things for them. I make most of my decisions based off of how other people will think, feel, or react to them, and on the off chance that I do still do something they react negatively to, I take immediate responsibility for those feelings. Because of all this, I have a tendency to listen to everyone else's voice before I listen to my own. So much so that even if I have already analyzed and overanalyzed a decision, weighed the pros and cons, consulted the stars, and looked for answers in my tea leaves, someone simply disagreeing with me is enough to make me second-guess myself, especially if that person is important to me. So, that's me. Or rather, That was me, but we're getting to that. And play. The next day, I realized that this person was actually going to take me up on my beer-induced offer and immediately started to panic. Not because I didn't want him to come, but because I knew some people in my life would have opinions about it. Regardless of the fact that he's no longer the idiot teenager he was 10 years ago, or the fact that I should be able to make my own decisions about who I spend my time with, I could just hear the responses in my head. What if he gets you sick? Why are you hanging out with him? And, as I mentioned, other people's dissenting opinions have a tendency to send me into a spiral of self-doubt and shame. So, why did I send the message? Well, shortly prior to that, I had read a book called Untamed by Glennon Doyle. There are a million little things that I took away from this book. I'm not going to spoil all of them because, hi, everyone should read it, but I am going to spoil 2. First, what Glennon refers to as the knowing. When she comes across chaos in her life, she sits in her closet, lets her mind sink deep down into herself, and the knowing nudges her towards the next right thing. She moves toward that thing without asking for permission or without offering explanation because, as she says, no one has ever lived or will ever live this life I am attempting to live. Second, the world hands us a list of instructions for what it means to be good, to be successful, to be the perfect parent, partner, blah, blah, blah. Glennon calls these memos and says that if we want to, we can burn them and write our own. Here are a couple of memos that I was handed. Self-sacrifice is the pinnacle of womanhood. Strong people keep their emotions in check and do not need to ask for help. And, the one that I was reading on August 8th, if you make a mistake by your definition or someone else's, it's because you are not smart enough to make the right choice. Now, on August 8th, I was nowhere near the knowing, but I did know that I was sick of abandoning myself for the sake of some arbitrary instructions that I never agreed to follow. So I grabbed a lighter and took a chance on burning one of my memos and sent the message. I also did this. August 10th, 2020, email. I'm currently seeking a therapist and was wondering if you were accepting new clients at this time. You please feel free to contact me via phone or email. Thank you. Up until this email and some of the work that has followed, I didn't even really know how to hear my own voice, let alone listen to it. Remember that sinking into yourself idea that Glennon just introduced? Yeah, completely foreign territory to me. Now, part of this can be attributed to some pretty intense manipulation from my past, but mostly it's just that I placed more value on being who other people wanted me to be than on being who I wanted me to be. But Glennon's words made me want to change that. December 2nd, 2020, journal entry. I think I just want to let myself be happy. Simple. Sometimes when the world is burning around us, like it has been for the last year at least, the biggest chance that we can take is just to get out of our own way and be happy. Stop letting other people define what we need and who we should be and just embrace who we are. Hopefully that is simple. Oftentimes, it's not. December 20th, 2020. Excerpt from a family I read to my letter. It's not that I'm pushing you away. I just need to take some space for myself to figure these things out. I need to trust me as much as I trust you guys. January 30th, 2021. Facebook message. I'm very anxious and I can't sleep and my brain is doing the dumb things. February 22nd, 2021. Journal entry. I can't stop crying today. I don't know what's happening to me right now. March 2nd, 2021. Text message. I had my doctor's appointment this morning. Picking up a prescription later today. See, part of opening the door to healing and growth is facing all the shit that's been trying to rip it off the hinges. I've got 28 years of messed up memos waiting outside and they are not headed straight for the fireplace on their own. Luckily, part of all this has involved me getting better at 3 really important things. Listening to myself, being able to identify what I need, and asking for help. Earlier this year, what I really needed was some pharmaceutically encouraged serotonin. It's taken a really long time for me to realize that what's best for me might not be what's best for someone else, and more importantly, that that's okay. In order to do things like set healthy boundaries and learn to be okay with disagreement, relationships have to change, and change is really hard. But I am done abandoning myself. Because the more I figure out who I am, the more that I like that person. I guess this is kind of a love story. She is messy and complicated and imperfect. She is also loving and fierce and curious. And, most importantly, she is exactly who I decide I want her to be, without asking permission, without offering explanation. April 16th, 2021. Words spoken to me in my kitchen by the man I invited to Eugene in the middle of a global pandemic after 8 years of not seeing each other, and now, again, to every single one of you watching this by me. Always be you. Even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Always be you. The world needs more you.
Picture this, a small 7-year-old girl, her brunette hair lightly brushing the tops of her shoulders as she's getting ready for school in the morning. She digs through her dirty clothes bin, stumbling upon the least dirty pair of socks she can find. She puts them on her feet. She walks down the hill to the bus stop where she'd wait for the bus the same way she always did. It was overcast that day, a light drizzle laid mist atop her unkempt hair, tickling the tip of her nose and welcoming her to another day of school. She could always rely on the winding road along the lake's edge to dizzy her, but also get her where she needed to go. A decade later, that girl's jaw is set, her head held high. Raising her right hand, she recited, "I, Tricia Maxfield, do solemnly swear to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic." Outside, leaves clung to autumn trees, holding out for the brush of November wind before starting their descent to winter's rest. After reciting the oath of enlistment, I looked around. Failing to find a familiar face, my head dropped, my chest tightened. I could feel the full weight of my body as I left the room. I boarded the bus back to the hotel where I'd lay on my bed thinking about what a 6-year commitment to the military could mean for a 17-year-old girl like me. From a young age, I knew college wasn't marked on the map. I knew if I wanted a chance at a secondary education, I'd need to take a detour to get there. All this because I grew up low income, raised by a single father and an absent mother, neither of which graduated from high school. In fact, both grew up in homes filled with heavy-handed love, which meant that for my parents, surviving was more important than education. Education was a journey I'd map alone. With little in the way of guidance and support, I'd buckle up into the driver's seat. My vehicle would soon pioneer down unfamiliar roads as I became a first-generation high school graduate. Autumn leaves clung to trees once more. I stood with my feet firmly planted as I stared at the large University of Oregon O that hung high on the Lillis complex. This was it, my first day of college. During my first class, I sat on the edge of my seat, a lightness in my body as I scribed every detail from my professor. But, like all long-distance road trips, a few roadblocks dictated necessary reroutes. That first year, guilt sat heavy in my stomach. I spent many nights staring at the map, calculating distance and resources to get me to my destination. I remembered that young girl who dressed herself for school, and at that point, I volunteered to deploy. I stepped off the C-17 cargo aircraft at the Bagram airport in Afghanistan. Sweat purled on my forehead as the silence of 300 soldiers weighed the seriousness of what we had just stepped into. Months passed, each paycheck going towards student debt, and eventually the deployment came to a close. I boarded the final aircraft in Kuwait to leave the Middle East. I closed my eyes, I tilted my head back, and I inhaled deeply as I found gratitude in walking away from an experience that, while volatile, allowed me to re-examine the map. After a 2-year detour, I was back on track to finishing my undergrad. While I struggled to transition back to civilian life, I found comfort in the familiar path of education. 6 years after setting out on my journey to an undergraduate degree, I woke up to a warm June morning. I pulled my graduation gown over my black dress, I donned my customized graduation cap, and I drove to the University of Oregon. The drive to campus didn't offer much time for reflection, just a few short moments of bubbling excitement. The air was hot, the sun was beaming. I stood with my feet firmly planted in the grass, wishing I could be barefoot and rooted in the cool soil. It had been a long journey to get here. Many years of self-parenting and discipline, but I did it. With confidence in my stride, I approached the microphone. Warmth filled my body as I gripped the sides of the podium. Feeling vindicated, I said, "My name is Trisha Maxfield. I'm a first-generation high school graduate, and now a first-generation college graduate." The crowd's loud applause had reaffirmed how hard this journey had been for me. Feelings of elation overrode the tears that would inevitably commemorate this accomplishment. I received my degree, shook the hands of my professors, and hugged my family at the end of the line. I am now a graduate student, looking to the horizon as I anticipate completing a dual master's next spring, marking another first for my family. I spent several years looking at the map. With all the unknowns lurking around winding corners, I constantly question if I had the grit to get to my destination. I think about my parents, how their upbringing set their priorities, and what it means for them to have a daughter who set out on an unknown winding road that they, for one reason or another, couldn't take. I think about my future children, what it means for them to have a mother who set out on an arduous journey, who is resilient in the face of adversity, to be an example that hard work pays off and that it's worth it in the end. To be an inspiration to them and to others has made this a journey worth taking.
Counting heartbeats is like counting seconds, but far more fascinating. It gives you focus, something to concentrate on, especially when everything else is too scary to really look at. Once you get past the insensible desperation, there's a heaviness and a weighting, as if everything is balanced on the thinnest gossamer thread and anything can make it fall one way or another. There in the ICU waiting room we sat, and we waited for word about our mother. Friends came, church family filtered in and out, family appeared, my brother from Philly and his girlfriend, aunties, cousins, and uncle, and we waited. When we first saw our mother, she was so still in the bed. The only sounds were the machines automating the most basic of functions. My sisters and I, we moved into Mom's ICU room and we hoped. It's embedded in our bones, hope, even when it's hopeless. We counted heartbeats, we prayed, we sang. We sang to her, we sang to ourselves, and we hoped. You gave me hope, you made me whole. It had been a week and she wasn't awake. We needed to decide to feed her or not. Well, we couldn't very well starve her to death. Now could we? So we hoped she'd wake up if we just gave her more time and took a chance. You took my place, you showed me grace. Another week went by. The breathing tube had to come out, and we needed to decide to put in a tracheostomy tube or not. Well, we couldn't very well suffocate her to death. Now could we? Again, we hoped she'd improve if only she had more time, so we took another chance. Oh, look to the sky, hear the angels cry. There is something maddening about being pushed in a direction in which you have no desire to go. Where there's life, there's hope. But they kept telling us she was actively dying, that she'd never wake up. But when she did, they said she'd never be the same person, she'd never get better, she'd never want to live like this, and time was running out to decide to pull the plug, and we needed to choose. But every day was another chance, and we wanted to give her as many as she needed. Once we convinced the medical professionals there were no plugs being pulled, then it became about discharging her. But Mom was nonverbal, defenseless. She couldn't even move away if someone hurt her. Well, we couldn't very well put her in a nursing home now, could we? My sisters and I, we were preparing our band for our first Italian tour. One by one, we called our musicians, our promoter, and canceled the tour. I took down our business website, closed my copy service, dropped out of school, and became Mom's primary caregiver. My sisters agreed to support my daughter and me and divide up the late night shift with Mom between themselves, and we all turned to our mother and offered her as many chances as she needed. My father one day was angry. He said if you guys weren't praying so hard, she wouldn't keep rallying like this. I asked him, who do you think we are? I don't have the power to make someone live or die. I mean, that's way above my pay grade. The best I can do is help Mom until she no longer needs me. I frequently encounter people who, when they learn that we are our mother's in-home caregivers, are shocked and impressed. Occasionally we get someone who disapproves and tells us Mother wouldn't have wanted to be a burden or how it's such a shame she didn't die. But usually they want to tell us how amazing we are. I'm no longer surprised by this, but I'm always perplexed. I don't understand why in-home caregiving is so novel. To me, this is the natural order of things. Maybe it's cultural. I remember watching a talk by Amy Hunter called Things White People Don't Know. She articulated this thing so clearly. She said, in the African American community, the relationship is what is important, not the transaction. Maybe it's familial. Ms. Hunter goes on to say that in our families, there's very little one can do that would result in being kicked out. And she's right. To us, people are not disposable. We might not agree with behaviors or attitudes, but in general, even the worst drug dealer can still go to Grandmama's house and get a hot meal. Maybe it's because of who my mother is. She's just so loving and tough and wise. One of my starkest memories of her was when I was very sick. She sat down next to me on the bed and said, "You can't stay here. You have to get up. Come on, I'll take you to the doctor." And she did. It took her almost 9 months to help me walk through healing until I could get up on my own and be a mother to my daughter. That's my mom. Whatever the reason, we are on chance number 3,157, and together we will take a chance on her until she no longer needs us. So here's to chance number 3,158. Don't give up the fight for your life. You shall live and not die.
I have been hiding behind these sage curtains for far too long now, fully drawn. A victim to the bed sheets and piles of laundry in every corner of my room, going on and on. I am one of the 16.2 million, a part of the 10.4% of women who have depression in the US. And I've fallen into this habit, have been sinking into this hole I built for myself, sinking into hour-long stares, staring at my lifelong to-do list of do the dishes and avoid acting suspicious. water your dying plants, and while you're at it, take off those damn sweatpants, because it's time again to pay your rent. But let's try today to be more content, confident, but finish that 10-page essay. And first, drink some water before you die of thirst. And by the 8th line, my mind wanders into this eternal Columbine, and I'll hide from the second-year struggles and that cocoon of worries, this sophomore slump stomping hard into my manic mind that's always yelling, hurry. I'm a product of 20 years too many terrible self-talks and getting rid of anxiety, neighborhood walks, never shocked at how often I feel tired, because this life of waking up and getting out of bed is far from retired. And why does it always have to be the hardest part of the day? Taking 3 doses of Boost-Brown, my illness sits on top of its throne, and when I start my day with Effexor, I've become this Stockholm Syndrome fool. And the medication should help, but I need to be better on the whole self-help thing before it gets too late. And the only thing sabotaging me is myself. But one morning, I went through an old journal. The thoughts of my 18-year-old self now becoming external. It was another list of to-dos, another list unperformed, a journal entry from my depression, just waiting to inform the trials and tribulations of what it's like to be me. And I sat and traced the lines of the one person who understood that hollow pain. Those days spent just staring at rain, how cliche, all the things in life I couldn't obtain. But on the bottom half of that page was a note, a love letter to my future self. This moment was arranged. She told me, and I quote, "Stop thinking so much and just try to make a change," listing out the ways I could be happy without coming out scathed, and this version of myself was endearing for all the terrifying reasons, because she was honest and blunt, saw this future of me that she wanted to set free, how I used to have hope. Now here at 20, that's not what it seems. She pushed me into my chair, sat me with my burdens, told me the longer I just sit in this room, the more things would worsen, forcing my eyes open, and gave me a token of words unspoken, that the strongest person in this world is myself. I'm the one who can get me out. And I realized then how my younger self was more wise, more badass, more kind to myself. And in that moment, I did what she told me to do. I pulled the curtains back for the first time in a month and let that light in to remind me how I'm stronger than beige duvets, how great I look in March sunlight midday, how my mind is more chaotic than tiny tsunamis and koi fish ponds, but is beautiful in all of its chemical bonds. And although those affirmations felt so unfamiliar, I'll repeat those lines to myself until it's much more clear, because this ignorance to my depression I thought would make it more bliss, but instead has just manifested into this eternal blindness that only persists, just hoping it'd go away, hoping neglection would result in difference. So I've decided to cut the cord. I now know that I'm a person with a purpose and a body filled with bones that can move and blood pumping from this big heart, a life from which I don't want to depart from anymore, because I'm not finished. No, I am just getting started. I got at least, 50 years left of me, and I'm gonna spend it on the once guilty pleasures of small, beautiful moments that'll come up whenever and reassure me that this world is not just my trauma. I want to get to know myself, from finding that center and turning obstacles into experiences I'll always want to remember, and never, ever stop writing love letters about life. I want to love life so hard, my heart breaks from the effort. My bones will become invincible from the post-traumatic endeavors. And in that moment, I sat in my room next to those laundry piles and basked in wonderful silence for the first time. Silence that used to feel awkward and disagreeable, but here it was bliss. and I couldn't miss the sight of who I was trying to become, but already was. Someone that's brilliant and sweet, but also bleak and will surrender sometimes before even facing defeat. And I'm not saying what I'm doing instantly cures my depression, like the Advil I take for headaches. No, I am a highly depressed and crippling anxious individual. That is who I am, and that's okay. But instead of staying in this birdcage view of everything sucks and being scolded for my scars, I'm taking off the gray tinted glasses and forcing myself to look at the good, even if some days it's small. Because this works for me. Because happiness is a choice that I actively have to make to take this chance on life for myself. And I'm doing this, at least trying, every single day.
Thanks for watching Intertwined Chances. We are so grateful to share in community with you all and to witness together the power of storytelling. My name is Alyssa Laris, and I work with Abigail and the rest of the planning committee to prepare Intertwined. I wanted to take a few moments to say some extra special thank yous. First, to our storytellers. You are all incredible and brave, and it is an honor to hear your stories. Thank you for your courage and trust throughout this process. Thank you to our story coaches and planning committee. This could not have come together without you all. I appreciate each of you and your dedication to bringing Intertwined to life each and every year. Finally, a big thank you to Cullen Vance, our musician and video editor. You bring the magic in ways we could not on our own. Thank you. For those of you watching, we hope you'll take a few minutes to fill out our feedback survey that can be found on our website at blogs.uoregon.edu/intertwined. Also, if you are a part of the UO community and want to get involved with Intertwined, please reach out to Abigail Leader. Her email is aleader@uoregon.edu and can be found on our website as well. Thanks again for sharing in the magic of Intertwined. We hope you are inspired by the courage of our storytellers to take your own chance.